We're starting a new series called Facing Fear. Fall is officially here. Things are cooling off. Now, I am a person where this is my favorite time of year. You what? Oh, okay. I love hanging out by bonfires. As a matter of fact, I think I've got some pictures of some of our favorite things. I love sitting around a bonfire, jumping in leaves, raking leaves, carving pumpkins. Now, I don't know where you stand on this, but Halloween is coming up with the month of October coming in. And, there's this aura of spookiness or fear. And I am a fan of Halloween. Now, let me make a slight caveat. I'm not a fan of horror movies. Don't like them for multiple reasons, one of which is the fear that they invoke inside of me. But there's multiple reasons I don't like horror movies. But I am a fan of the fun spookiness that Halloween brings about. I enjoy jack-o'-lantern carving. I enjoy spiders. I enjoy decorating stuff for Halloween. Matter of fact, a few years ago, our family got a new Christmas tree, and we were so excited about it. Everybody was like, let's set it up early, let's set it up early. They wanted to set it up in October, and I was like, all right, you can set it up in October, but it's got to be Halloween themed. And so now we have a Halloween tree that we set up every year at our house because we just enjoy this. Now, fear comes along with this spookiness of Halloween and this time of year. And there's a lot of fun that comes into Halloween. You get to get dressed up, you get to jump out and scare people, all kinds of stuff. But there's a difference between the fun spookiness or fear that comes along this time of year and the very real, legitimate fears that we have in our lives. I know that I have some real, legitimate fears in my life. And I am willing to bet that you have some real, legitimate fears in your own life. And so the thing we're going to look at this entire month is how do we handle, how do we approach, how do we cope or deal with the fears that we really face that are deep down inside of us. And the best way that we can look at that is to look at how Jesus handled his fears. And for that, we're going to turn to the book of John. I want to give you a little bit of backstory here as we move into the book of John, because, guys, Jesus, as he went to the cross, he had some fears. And looking at how he approached those fears is able to help us as we approach our fears. And so in John, we're going to be hanging out in chapter 13 and a little bit in chapter 14 tonight. Jesus is in the upper room with his disciples. He is going to be taken away that night. He has already washed the disciples' feet. They have shared are sharing the Passover meal together. It will be his last Passover celebration on this earth. And he knows that in the next day or so, he will be betrayed, beaten, denied, and crucified. And Jesus had some very real fears leading up to the cross. And here's what I think is so cool about how Jesus handled those fears. And it's the thing we're going to talk about all night tonight. This just scratches the surface on how we handle our fears. But one of the first things that Jesus did is he named his fears. Jesus named his fears. He was honest about what he was about to face and that he was afraid of it. Check this out in John chapter 13, verse 21 and then 37 and 38. After saying these things, Jesus was troubled in his spirit and testified, "Truly, truly, I say to you, one of you will betray me." And then in John chapter 13, 37 and 38, Peter said to him, "Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you." And Jesus answered, "Will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me 3 times. Now, here's our tendency. We know the end of the story. We know that Jesus goes to the cross. He takes it like a champ. He's buried. 3 days later, he raises from the grave, and he's like, booyah, if that's even a phrase anymore. And he's the King of Kings, right? And so what I think as I read Scripture, and I imagine that as you read Scripture, we kind of view Jesus as a robot. Emotionless, here for a task, going to do the task, accomplishing the task, and moving on. But what we see here in Jesus is that he had some very real emotion as he was headed to the cross. We know that he was afraid because in Matthew chapter 26, which will not be up on the screen, in Matthew chapter 26, he prays to God 3 times that there is another way that he would be able to save the world, that he would not have to go to the cross. We know this is not something he wanted to do. And if you look in these verses, Jesus was troubled in his spirit. He was hurting. He did not want to face the next few hours that were before him. He was afraid. He had spent 3 years with these men, and suddenly he's going to be denied by one of them and betrayed by another. Jesus had some very real fears. And in each of these verses, yes, Jesus is predicting the future. And he's giving his leaders and his followers and his disciples a chance to say, look, Jesus is who he said he would be. This happened. But in a very real sense, now this is just from my own brain, okay? So take it for what it's worth. But in a very real sense, I see Jesus here naming his fears. I see Jesus saying, listen, guys, one of you is going to betray me, and it terrifies me. Peter, you're going to deny me, and it scares me to death. And he's just honest with his fears. I went to school in Cincinnati Christian University, which is no longer a university. And Cincinnati is kind of a rougher town in general, rougher city. And we just happened to live in a rough part of Cincinnati. We lived on Glenway Avenue, and it was a rough area. And so my senior year-ish, somewhere around in there, a couple of our students actually got attacked and got injured by someone in the city. And at that point, the school made the entire student body come and take a self-defense class. And they brought in this lady that is an ex-narcotics undercover police officer whose job it was to take down like the big boss of the drug rings that were around the city, right? And so she came in and she taught us all kinds of cool stuff. Like she taught us what to do if someone comes at you with a gun. She taught us what to do if someone comes at you with a knife. She taught us the best way to possibly defend yourself against different attacks, like from behind and from the front and all kinds of stuff. But there's one thing more than anything else that stuck with me. It's this. Most attacks will happen after you've been followed for a little bit. And she said, here's our tendency, okay? We're walking along the street, having a great time, and we notice someone behind us. And what we do is we kind of look back. All right, someone's following me. And we keep walking. And we look back again. Someone's still following me. And we walk a little faster. And then we look back again. That person is also walking a little faster. And so maybe we walk faster, maybe we run. But she said, here's what we are doing in that moment. A person that is coming to attack you is going to feed off your fear. And in that moment, we have a fear in our minds. Someone is following me. And you know what we do? We ignore it and we keep walking. And she said that is the worst possible thing that you can do. When someone is following you, what you are supposed to do is you are supposed to turn around and face that fear head on. 9 times out of 10, it catches people completely off guard. You're walking along and all of a sudden she said, scream as loud as you can. I won't scream because I'm in a mic. But she said, scream as loud as you can. Why are you following me? She said to use some stronger words than that, but she said, just go up and just start screaming at them. Why are you following me? I see you following me. You don't need to be following me. What do you want with me? That is going to catch this guy completely off guard. It's going to give you the power, and he is not going to be able to necessarily come at you as quickly because they want to attack people that aren't ready for it, that are scared. And 9 times out of 10, she said that person is going to be like, I wasn't doing anything, and just walk away. Now, you won't know if that person was actually following you or not, because they're not going to be like, oh, yeah, I was following you. I guess I won't anymore, right? But she said that is the best way that you can save yourself in those moments. And it's true in our lives as well. And we see Jesus doing this right here in the book of John. Because naming our fear changes everything. When we turn around and we face that person, it changes things. It gives us a heads up. It gives us a chance to escape. When we are honest about our very real fears in our own lives, it changes things. Naming our fear changes everything. Now, I know what you're thinking. All right, CJ, I'll give it to you. You turn around, you face someone, they run away, that fear is gone, you won the day, great. But Jesus named his fears here. He said, I'm afraid of being betrayed, I'm afraid of being denied, I'm afraid of being beaten, I'm afraid of going to the cross. I don't want to do any of that. I'd rather not. I'm going to go ahead and name those fears. And guess what happened? Jesus was betrayed. Jesus was beaten. Jesus was denied. And Jesus went to the cross. So, did naming his fear change anything? And here's where it gets really, really interesting. Because naming our fears doesn't necessarily change the outcome. Naming our fears changes everything by changing us. Naming our fears changes everything by changing us. John chapter 14, look at what happens to Jesus. John 14, 27 through 30. Now, keep in mind the previous scriptures we read. They started out, Jesus was troubled in his spirit. Look at how this one starts. My peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you, not as the world would give, do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. You heard me say to you, I'm going away and I will come to you. If you loved me, you would have rejoiced, because I am going to the Father, for the Father is greater than I. And now I have told you before it takes place, so that when it does take place, you may believe. I will no longer talk much with you, for the ruler of the world is coming. He has no claim on me, but I do as the Father commanded me, so that the world may know that I love the Father. Rise and let us go from here. Here's what's cool. Now, there are moments where naming our fear changes the outcome. The guy that's following you. When I was a kid, I went over to my grandparents, and my grandpa, he loved watching mystery shows. Not like Psych mystery shows, which is an awesome show, but like America's Most Wanted mystery shows or Unsolved mystery shows, where, you'd have the guy stand up in like this very serious voice, and they would explain the entire crime and everything that happened. Well, I just so happened, 9, 10-year-old CJ, hey, I'm so happy. I just happened to be over at my grandparents where they did the mystery of the guy that killed his family with a hammer, right? Which for 10-year-old CJ was pretty frightening. And so I went home and I was terrified, right? I was convinced that this guy that was on America's Most Wanted was in Plainfield, Indiana. He was outside our house, and he was going to attack us, right? And I went to my parents, and I was like, Mom, Dad, like, we're done for. They haven't caught the guy. They don't know where he is. I'm sure he's coming after me. And they calmed me down, and they were like, listen, CJ, this guy is not going to come after you. And he didn't. And I told them, and they helped me realize that, a guy on America's Most Wanted is not targeting 10-year-old CJ, right? That's just not something that's going to happen, although it would be crazy if it did, right? And sometimes we have these fears that, like, we name them and we're like, yeah, that's okay. The likelihood of that happening is not great. And other times we name our fears and the outcome doesn't necessarily change. We have a family member that is involved in a horrible accident or gets a horrible sickness or disease and it's life-threatening, and we're scared. We have a friend that walks away from our lives and we're not really sure they're ever going to come back. And they were someone that we were really, really close to, and there's fear associated with that. And see, there's times where we name our fear and it changes the outcome. And my parents were able to reassure me that no one is going to come after me. And the guy that's following you turns around and walks away. And there's times that we name our fears, and it doesn't necessarily change the outcome, but instead it just kind of changes us. We're going to spend the rest of this month talking about how it changes us after we name our fear. A lot of that goes into understanding our fear and coping with our fear, but you can't get anywhere unless you name your fear. Because naming our fear changes everything by changing us. And we see that in Jesus. We see him go from being troubled in his spirit to offering peace to his disciples. We see him going from saying, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times, to saying, my peace I give to you. My peace I leave with you. And I love this change in Jesus. Like, he doesn't want to go to the cross. He doesn't want to face rejection and betrayal and denial. He doesn't want to face a beating. He doesn't want to be nailed to a cross. But I love the way that Jesus ends this right here. I do as the Father has commanded me, so that the world may know that I love the Father. Rise, let us go from here. Wow, what a powerful, powerful statement. We see Jesus, he's like, all right, I'll be honest, guys, I'm scared. Satan's coming after me. The verse before this, though, he says, Satan has no control over me. I'm going to do what God asks me to do. Let's rise. Let's go right now. We love moments like this, right? We love watching people march headlong into their fears and save the day. That's why movies like this are so popular. We love these moments, don't we? See, Iron Man specifically stated in the beginning of the movie, he doesn't want to get involved in this fight. Why? Because he doesn't want to lose his family. That was his whole hesitancy for even getting involved in the fight in the first place. In Infinity War, Doctor Strange told Iron Man there's only one outcome where they win. Out of like 4 million different possibilities, there's only one. And you can see in his eyes, next time you watch this movie, go back and pay attention to the face that Iron Man has as he looks at Doctor Strange. And you can see there is this fear. There is this idea that he knows what's coming. He knows that if he does this, his family, he's going to die. He's going to lose his family. And there is this fear as Doctor Strange tells him, there's only one. And then he stares that fear in the face, and he runs headlong into it, and he snaps and saves the day. And you see, Jesus did the same thing. He was scared, and he didn't want to go to the cross, but then he says, I do what the Father says, rise, let's go. And he goes headlong into fear, and he saved the day. And this is why we love movies like this, because it connects us with Jesus. But here's the thing, is that oftentimes in our own lives, in our own fears, we don't run headlong into the fear. We tend to run away from the fear. We tend to ignore it. We tend to pretend like everything's okay. And ultimately, we put ourselves in a worse position than if we had turned and faced our fears and did the hard work of understanding and being better and working on it and running headlong into the fear. Now, we're going to talk all month about what it looks like to name your fear and to understand your fear and to pray through your fear and face your fear and to move forward in the midst of the very real fears that you guys have in your own lives. But tonight, I simply want to stop and take a step back and say that it all starts with honesty. It all starts with us being able to say, this is my fear. And so I'm going to start it off for you guys tonight. And I'm going to tell you one of my biggest fears in this life. And it's something that I have tried to work on and be honest about and move forward through. And it will be something that we'll talk about this later this month, but it will be something that I will work on for the rest of my life. One of my biggest fears is the fear of failure. Specifically, one of my biggest fears is that I would be a failure as a husband or a father. That I would do something to destroy my family. That I would be someone that would not allow my kids to grow up to be who they were created to be. And I have named that fear. And I have spent time investing and running headlong into that. And I will do that for the rest of my life. And I want to encourage you guys this week. I always give a really practical challenge. And I want to encourage you guys this week to find a trusted adult and just be honest. What are some things that are some of your biggest fears? What are some things that you are afraid of? And how can you begin to work through those? How can you begin to trust God in the midst of those? How can you get support and help around those fears? You guys, when I was in high school and college, one of my biggest fears was not being married. And I prepared myself to not be married. And that was one of the things that was one of the ways that I worked through that. All of us have some fears. All of us have some things in our lives that we're nervous about. Maybe for you, you have a family member that's sick and you are fearful that they're not going to make it. One of the worst things you can do is pretend like it's all okay. Maybe for you, you're dealing with some stuff and you're fearful that you're not going to come out on the other side. one of the worst things you can do is keep all that to yourself. And so this month, as we talk about fears, yes, we're going to talk about the fun spookiness of Halloween, but we're going to spend some time really focusing in on these very real fears that we have. And I want to encourage you to start this week by finding a trusted adult and simply sharing what your fear is. And just asking for help processing that. And we'll spend some more time this month talking about how to process that as well. Check this out, and then the band can come on up.